How I survived the toxic friendship that almost destroyed my love and left me on the brink of the abyss. There are days when I still wake up feeling trapped in that phase of my life, as if the voices, the looks, and the silences still echo within me. You can't pretend it's over, because certain experiences don't just fade with time. They settle in, shape us, and force us to find courage where before there was only fear. What I experienced with Sabrina taught me a lot, especially about how far love goes when someone is sabotaging it from behind. When I met Sabrina, I thought the worst was behind me. I was coming out of a divorce, trying to rebuild my life, and finally felt like I'd found someone who spoke the same emotional language as me. But what I didn't imagine was that, along with her, would come a burden I'd never faced. Her best friend, Raphael. At first, it seemed normal. Sabrina talked about him a lot, and I tried to understand. They had a long history of friendship, full of complicity and support, and I respected that. But little by little, I began to notice something different, almost imperceptible. That kind of presence that takes up too much space, that doesn't know its own limits. Raphael was always there, even when he didn't need to be. He texted constantly, made jokes about me, showed up at inopportune moments, and when I tried to set boundaries, he became the villain. Sabrina apologized, not to me, but to him, and it started to hurt. I remember a specific night that marked the beginning of my real discomfort. We were at home, having a quiet dinner, and Raphael showed up unannounced. He said he was passing by and decided to come upstairs. I tried to hide my discomfort, but inside I was boiling. He sat down, opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and started talking as if he owned the place. Sabrina laughed, finding it natural. I felt invisible. It was as if this guy had a free pass to cross all boundaries, including those of my relationship. When he left, I tried to talk to her. I talked about respect, about space, but she only replied, "Gabriel, Raphael is like that. He doesn't mean any harm." And that's when I realized the problem was much deeper than I imagined. Things started to repeat themselves. Every time Raphael showed up, something between us broke. He provoked subtle arguments, sowed doubts, made comments about my behavior, my intentions. And Sabrina, as much as she claimed to love me, seemed to believe him more than me. I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was being paranoid. But then the coincidences came. A deleted message, a late-night call, an emergency when he always needed her. Raphael fed off this power, and Sabrina, without realizing it, fed it too. I tried to breathe, to remain calm, but inside me grew a mixture of anger and sadness. I loved her, but I was beginning to hate what this bond was doing to us. My body began to feel it even before my head could. Insomnia, tightness in my chest, loss of appetite. I worked tired, unfocused, because my mind kept returning to the same question. How far can respect go when love can't set boundaries? My friend said I'd changed, quieter, more tense, and it was true. I walked on eggshells in my own home, afraid of appearing controlling or jealous. I kept quiet for fear of losing, and in that silence, I slowly lost myself. The worst part is when the person you love starts to see you through the eyes of someone who hates you. That's what started happening. Everything I said was interpreted as criticism. Every attempt at dialogue turned into a fight. And Raphael always appeared right after with that savior air, reinforcing the idea that she deserved someone more soft. I started to feel angry at him, but also angry at myself for not being able to break out of that spiral. It was as if the relationship had become a silent triangle, where I struggled alone to maintain something that was constantly being sabotaged. I knew Raphael had a history of interfering in her other relationships. Her ex-husband Tullio had been through it. But when I tried to broach the subject, she completely shut down. She said I was being just like Tullio. The remark destroyed me inside. I remember one night when Raphael went completely overboard. He and Sabrina had argued over a project they were working on together, and he, completely upset, went to her apartment. I was there. I saw him push the door open, yell, and when I tried to intervene, he pushed me hard. Sabrina was crying, but still tried to calm him down. I'll never forget that scene, the fear on her face, the helplessness in me. I called the police, and even then, she begged me not to do anything so as not to make things worse. It was that day that I realized the problem wasn't Raphael anymore. It was how emotionally attached she was to him, as if that bond had become a dependency. In the following days, silence fell over the house. I tried to talk, but she withdrew. Raphael somehow still managed to send her messages, apologizing, playing the victim, saying he was going through a rough patch, and she believed it. I felt the ground disappear from under my feet, as if logic no longer existed. It was such a subtle manipulation that before I realized it, I was isolating myself from everyone to try to fix something that wasn't solely up to me. Mateus, her brother, was one of the few who noticed what was happening. He reached out to me and said he'd also tried to open her eyes, but that Raphael always managed to turn things around. It was the first time I felt less alone in that mess. Even so, I still tried to believe that love could overcome it. I tried to suggest couples therapy, deeper conversations, but Sabrina said she didn't see the need. It was as if she were numb. Bianca, Mateus's wife, said something to me that I've never forgotten. She'll only wake up when the suffering is greater than the attachment. At the time, it hurt to hear, but it was the absolute truth. I started keeping everything to myself, writing rants I never sent, drafts that ended in tears. I looked in the mirror and no longer recognized the man I was. I, who had always been rational and balanced, was on the verge of a breakdown. The turning point came one random morning. I'd been up all night, and when I woke up, I saw a notification on her phone. It was Raphael again. He'd sent a photo of the two of them from years ago, with the caption, "We were better when no one got involved." It filled me with a mixture of disgust and pity. I got up, looked at her sleeping, and felt an absurd weight on my chest. I realized that if I didn't walk away, I would end up destroying myself. I spent the entire day silent, reflecting. Late that afternoon, I sat next to her and told her I had to leave. She cried, begged me not to do it, said I was giving up on her, but in truth, I was choosing to survive. Leaving that house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. There was no shouting, no fuss, just a heavy silence, the kind that says more than any words. I packed my things into 2 suitcases without looking around much. Each object seemed to carry an absurd emotional weight, as if pulling me back. When I closed the door, I felt relief and pain at the same time. It was like ripping away something that was a part of me. In the following days, I slept poorly, feeling like I was abandoning someone I loved. But deep down, I knew I was saving myself from a cycle that would never end as long as she remained blind to his manipulation. The first few weeks were chaotic. I'd wake up and automatically feel like texting, asking if she was okay. But I held back. My body reacted as if it were in withdrawal. That's what it was. Emotional withdrawal. I felt angry, sad, and sometimes wondered if I'd overdone it. Until one day Mateus called me. He told me that Raphael had started visiting her house again and that the situation was getting worse. It was painful to hear, but it also reinforced the decision I'd made. I could no longer try to save someone who still didn't want to be saved. I needed to take care of myself, rebuild what was left of my peace. That's when I started therapy. At first, I didn't believe talking to a stranger could help me, but the truth is, I needed to get out what had been bottled up. The psychologist helped me understand that I wasn't crazy, that what I experienced was a type of indirect emotional abuse, silent but devastating. We talked about control, guilt, and how manipulation disguises itself as friendship. I realized how much I had normalized disrespect to avoid losing someone. and how much this distanced me from myself. The pain was intense, but for the first time I felt like I was facing it head-on, without hiding behind excuses. Over time, the memories began to change shape. At first, each memory hurt like an open wound. Then they began to transform into learning experiences. I learned not to romanticize suffering, to understand that love without limits isn't love, it's dependence. I went back to doing simple things I'd forgotten. Walking alone, listening to music without thinking about anyone else, cooking just for myself. Little by little, the silence that once frightened me began to feel like a space of rest. Therapy made me realize that I didn't need to be the savior of anyone else's story. I just needed to find myself in my own. One day, months later, I received a message from Sabrina. She said she'd distanced herself from Raphael after another nasty fight, that she'd begun to notice everything I was trying to show her. She apologized. She said she now understood what I meant by boundaries. I read that message with my heart racing. Part of me wanted to get back together. Another part knew it would be a mistake. I simply replied that I hoped she could heal. And for the first time, I ended a conversation without crying. That was my liberation, realizing that the love still existed, but that the attachment was behind me. Even after that message from Sabrina, it took me a while to feel completely free. Love doesn't turn off with a switch. Sometimes I dreamed about her, waking up with the feeling that it had all been a misunderstanding and that we could start over. But all I had to do was remember the days I felt diminished, the nights I slept with a heavy heart, to understand that it wasn't longing. It was a remnant of the emotional dependence I'd experienced. The mind insists on romanticizing what hurt because emptiness is frightening, and I needed to face that emptiness head-on. I had relapses, of course. I tried to distract myself. I went out with other people, but I realized I was repeating patterns. I wanted someone who would make me forget, not someone with whom I truly wanted to build. It was painful to realize that, to move on, I would have to face loneliness and get used to it. The following months were a mix of rebuilding and resilience. I started taking care of my body again, running, eating better, sleeping more peacefully. But every now and then the past still nagged at me. One day, I ran into Sabrina on the street. She was different, thinner, with a tired look in her eyes. We stopped and talked for a few minutes. She told me she was also in therapy and that Raphael had moved to another city after a scandal at work. I listened in silence. Deep down, I felt relief that she was trying to get back on her feet. But I also realized that that cycle really needed to be over. We said goodbye with a hug, no promises, no plans. I left feeling light. For the first time, all I felt was gratitude for having survived, and for her finally trying to do the same. After that encounter, something inside me shifted. It was as if I'd been waiting for that closure without knowing it. Life began to get back on track. I reconnected with friends I distanced myself from, reconnected with my family, and started going out again without fear of bumping into memories. In one of my therapy sessions, my psychologist said something that became a turning point for me. We don't lose people. We let go of what was holding us back from growing. It was then that I understood it wasn't about guilt, but about a cycle, and that when we learn to recognize patterns, we begin to break them, even if it hurts in the process. Maturity came in small, almost invisible doses. I began to recognize signs of manipulation in other contexts, to no longer accept the bare minimum, to set clear boundaries. This gave me a sense of control over my own life that I had never felt before. Before, I confused empathy with submission. Today, I understand that being kind doesn't mean self-denial. The anger that once consumed me gave way to compassion, for myself especially. I began to look at my story with more tenderness, as someone who understands that mistakes are also part of the journey. The final turning point came when I realized I could talk about all of this without crying, without feeling ashamed, without blaming myself. I shared my story in an online support group, and the response I received was incredible. People said they were going through the same thing, that they recognized themselves in my words. There, I realized the power of vulnerability. I understood that exposing pain isn't weakness, it's liberation. I'm no longer the same guy who endured in silence. Today, if something hurts me, I speak up. If someone crosses a line, I walk away. I learned that protecting yourself is also a form of love. Today, when I look back, I can see every detail of that period, like someone observing a scar that, despite its pain, reminds me of my strength. I remember Raphael breaking into the house, the silent fights, the manipulative messages, and I feel a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I survived, sadness because no one should have to go through something like that. But this pain shaped me, taught me to identify signs I previously ignored, to trust my judgment more. I understood that love isn't submission and that true friendship respects boundaries. I still miss Sabrina, but it's a longing free from guilt or fear. Today, she's also rebuilding herself, and I genuinely root for that. One of the hardest things was accepting that I couldn't save anyone. I tried for months and only wore myself out. That's when I understood that to truly love, I needed to put myself first. I began investing in myself, my projects, my friendships. I began to notice small signs of manipulation in other relationships, and whenever they arose, I had the courage to set boundaries. It was liberating to realize that what had previously seemed like weakness, saying no, walking away, putting my well-being first, was actually a show of strength. There are still bad days. I still feel a tightness in my chest when I think about what I lost or how much I was manipulated. But today, I can take a deep breath and remember that I survived, that I fought, and that I learned to truly love myself. I learned that some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us something vital. The value of protecting ourselves and the importance of recognizing our own dignity. This lesson, however painful, was liberating. Sharing my story makes me realize we're not alone. I've seen people comment that they felt seen, that they understood they don't have to tolerate manipulation or disrespect. This gives me hope because it shows that it's possible to transform pain into learning. Overcoming adversity isn't a straight line. It's full of ups and downs, setbacks and confrontations with the past. But with each step, however small, emotional freedom grows stronger. Today, I know I can handle any situation because I've been through the worst. In the end, I learned that emotional survival is a daily achievement. That self-love isn't selfish, it's a necessity. That recognizing manipulation and acting on it is an act of courage few possess. I still struggle with remnants of fear and insecurity, but now I know there is a path, that it's possible to rebuild even when everything seems lost. This story I share isn't one of hatred or resentment, but of overcoming. If you're going through something similar, know this: the pain doesn't have to be permanent, and your strength is greater than any manipulation. Emotional freedom is possible, and you can get there.
The day my mother-in-law almost destroyed my life, and how I turned it around. There are days when my heart still aches, even though I know that phase has passed. It's as if my body remembers before my mind. Sometimes, a simple whiff of perfume or the touch of an object in the house transports me back to those days when I walked on eggshells in my own home. My name is Sylvia. I'm 35, and I recently discovered how much a person can hurt you with words spoken in a tone of love. When I married Gustavo, I thought I was entering a new, lighter, more mature phase. After losing Renato, my first husband, I learned the value of stability and complicity. But nothing prepared me for living with Alice, my mother-in-law. At first, she seemed like a protective and needy woman, someone afraid of losing her son. But little by little, I realized that what she wanted wasn't love. It was control. For the first few months, I tried to fit in. I wanted to be accepted. I thought that with patience and empathy, things would work out. Alice showed up at the house almost every day, always with a ready excuse. I brought you a cupcake. I just stopped by to see the baby. I wanted to help with lunch. And I, eager to please, would open the door. It was subtle at first. A comment about the color of the curtains, a light criticism of the food, an observation about how I spoke to Gustavo. I smiled even though I felt uncomfortable, trying to believe it was just me exaggerating. But then that feeling of invasion began to grow. I no longer felt like I owned my own home. It was as if everything had to pass through her scrutiny. The menu, the way I spoke, even the sound of my laughter. Little by little, I realized that nothing I did would ever be enough. She always found a way to make me feel inadequate. One day, I even cooked dinner the way she liked, just to avoid criticism, and still heard, Bianca could do it better. Bianca was Gustavo's ex-wife. From the beginning, Alice made a point of bringing her back into conversations. She really knew how to take care of him, she would say, as if I were a poor substitute. It was cruel, but she said it all in a sweet tone, impossible to confront without sounding ungrateful or hysterical. I felt trapped. Gustavo, out of love and fear of conflict, urged me to be patient. She'll get used to it, he would say. But time passed, and our time together became a minefield. Each visit left a mark, a doubt, a wound, an anger I couldn't express. The worst began when she started involving my son Matthias in all of this. He was only 11 years old, still trying to come to terms with his father's absence and adapt to his new family. Alice said he needed more control, that I was raising him too loose, and began treating him with an authority that made me uncomfortable. One day, I overheard her telling him that a good mother is one who knows how to listen to her elders. Matthias was confused and began to question me. It was then that I felt she wanted to undermine me, even in front of my own son. I cried in secret so as not to worry Gustavo or the boy, but the pain grew silently. It wasn't just mother-in-law jealousy, it was a heavy, calculated psychological game. I was losing control of my own life and feigning normalcy to avoid being labeled as exaggerated. Then came the day of the party. It was my father-in-law's birthday. The house was full. The whole family gathered. I could already sense something was wrong. Because Alice was looking at me in that way, I'd learned to fear. A smile on her face, but venom in her eyes. At one point, in the middle of a small conversation, she blurted out, "That woman destroyed a family to get my son." The silence that fell was deafening. People stared at me as if waiting for a reaction. I froze. I felt my face burn, my hands tremble, and my heart beat wildly. I left without saying anything, locked myself in the bathroom, and cried like I hadn't cried in a long time. The pain wasn't just from the public humiliation, it was from the feeling of helplessness. I, who had always been strong, felt small, weak, completely emptied. In that moment, I realized I was letting someone slowly destroy me, and worst of all, in my own home. That night, I stayed locked in the bathroom for hours. The sounds of the party outside continued as if nothing had happened. Laughter mixed with music and clinking glasses, while inside me, there was only silence and shame. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. The smeared mascara, the puffy face, and that empty look. I looked like a different woman. When Gustavo knocked on the door and saw me like that, he understood the situation had gone too far. I collapsed in his lap and told him everything, unfiltered, without trying to hide it. Each word seemed to lift a weight from my chest. I spoke of the constant visits, the comparisons, the manipulations, the criticisms, and the way she was trying to poison my relationship with my son. He was silent for a while, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Anger. Not at me, but at the situation. Over the next few days, Gustavo began to observe for himself. When Alice called, he answered on speakerphone. When she came, he listened to what I meant, and it didn't take long for him to pick up on everything I was saying. She tried to hide it, but the tone was always the same. "She's taking you away from your family. This house isn't your style. You've been different since you married her." Gustavo finally understood that it wasn't an exaggeration. It was pure manipulation. One day, he looked at me seriously and said, "I won't allow this to continue." And for the first time in months, I felt hope. But setting boundaries with someone like Alice isn't easy. She cried, played the victim, and became the narrative. She started telling everyone that I was pushing her son away, and people, unaware of the truth, bought into the drama. Things reached a boiling point when she showed up unexpectedly one Sunday morning, saying she wanted to see her grandson. Hater had just been born, and I was still recovering from the birth. I was vulnerable, tired, trying to adjust to the new routine. She came in without asking, took the baby from my lap, and started giving orders. "You have to hold him properly. He might choke. Are your nipples cracked? You're doing it wrong." I just wanted to scream, but exhaustion paralyzed me. Gustavo tried to intervene, and she exploded. She said I had bewitched him, that he was blindly in love with a gold digger. It was the first time he had raised his voice to her. He asked her to leave. She slammed the door, saying she would never come back. I sat on the couch and cried, but it was a different kind of cry, a cry of liberation. For the first time, someone had stood up for me. Even so, the emotional toll was enormous. I lived on high alert, dreading every call, every message. Sometimes, just seeing her name on my phone screen would make my body freeze. It was as if I was waiting for the next attack. I began experiencing anxiety attacks, insomnia, and racing thoughts. It was Gustavo who suggested I seek therapy. At first, I resisted. I thought it would be enough to just distance myself. But I realized the wound ran deeper. I had lost faith in myself, in my ability to set boundaries. In the sessions, I began to realize how guilt was overwhelming me. I was afraid of being seen as the ungrateful daughter-in-law, afraid of causing more conflict, even afraid of losing my husband's love. But while I was protecting everyone, no one was truly protecting me, not even myself. It was in therapy that I began to understand the difference between respecting and putting myself down. And that changed everything. I learned that limitless love becomes submission. That family isn't about those who share blood, it's about those who truly support you. Little by little, I began to regain my voice. I began to say no, without excuses, to not open the door when I didn't want to hang up the phone when calls were full of indirect messages. It was difficult. Each imposed limit felt like a battle, but with each step, I felt lighter. I started to laugh without fear again, to sleep peacefully, to look in the mirror and recognize the woman I was before I lost myself trying to please someone impossible to please. Even with clearer boundaries, the process wasn't easy. Alice didn't give up trying to regain power over us. She sent long messages, full of passive-aggressive phrases, saying she missed her grandson, that she just wanted to see her son happy. Sometimes she sent gifts without a note, as a way to instill guilt. At first, it still bothered me. I read the messages and my stomach churned. Part of me wanted to respond, resolve, explain. Another part, the tired one, just wanted silence. Gustavo was firm. He said that until she changed her behavior, there would be no contact. And he kept his word. It was hard for him too. She was his mother after all. But seeing that he was willing to protect what we had was what gave me the strength to keep going. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in this war. Meanwhile, Matthias also began to change. He saw how much it all affected me, and even though he was just a child, he began to support me in a way I'll never forget. One day, he brought me a drawing. It was the three of us. Me, him, and Gustavo, holding hands. Above it, he wrote, "Real family." I cried so hard when I saw it. It was simple, but it meant everything. It was at that moment that I realized that, even with the wounds, we were rebuilding something true, something solid. He learned to command respect, too. When Alice tried to call him, asking why I wouldn't let them see each other, he replied, "Because you hurt my mother." Words spoken by a child, but with enormous weight. I realized that despite all the pain, something good was being born from it. The awareness that we deserve peace, and that love doesn't have to be accompanied by humiliation. Little by little, I began to truly care for myself. I returned to things I'd neglected. I started walking again, dressing up for pleasure rather than obligation. I began to feel alive again. Heitor's birth also brought new meaning to my life. Caring for him reminded me of how strong I was. When I watched him sleep, I thought about everything I'd faced to get there. Sometimes I cried softly, but it was a cry of gratitude, no longer of pain. The house, which had previously felt like a field of tension, began to fill with laughter. Gustavo and I created little traditions of our own. Sunday morning coffee, Friday night movies, candlelit dinner after the kids were asleep. Simple things, but they made me feel safe and that I belonged. Even so, there were setbacks. One day, on impulse, I responded to a message from Alice. I thought maybe things had changed. She said she wanted to apologize. I accepted the meeting, but regretted it. Within minutes, the old pattern reappeared. She started off speaking softly, then insinuated that I alienated Gustavo from the entire family. I took a deep breath, and unlike before, I didn't cry. I stood up, looked at her, and said, "I don't owe you anything anymore. I just want peace." I left that cafe trembling, but light. It was the first time I felt like I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. Overcoming things didn't happen overnight, but in that moment, I realized I was finally in control of my own story. Time passed, and Alice eventually distanced herself for good. Not because she wanted to, but because she lost the power she once had. Gustavo and I strengthened our relationship, now based on trust and boundaries. He also went to therapy, understanding the wounds of his childhood and how his mother had manipulated him emotionally for years. Today, he's a different man, more aware, more present, more of a partner. Sometimes a bitter memory still surfaces, but now it doesn't define me. It just reminds me of where I came from. And every time I think about giving up on something difficult, I remember that bathroom, the cold floor, the tears, and how I got up from there with my heart in pieces, but with the will to rebuild. I've learned to appreciate every small victory. Today, when I look at Matthias playing with Heitor, I see that I didn't let Alice's toxicity destroy our family. Every hug, every laugh in the backyard, every question about simple things is a reminder that true love requires care and protection. Before, I thought being strong meant giving in, keeping quiet, and not confronting. Now I understand that being strong means setting boundaries, even if it hurts momentarily. Every step I took to protect myself was an act of courage I never imagined I had. And even when setbacks happened, I took a deep breath and remembered that I'd faced the worst. The feeling of being able to make decisions without fear is indescribable. Life wasn't perfect again, but it became mine. What surprised me most was realizing how trauma can shape, but not define. I saw myself as a victim for so long, and deep down, I believed I would never be able to command respect. But when I looked at myself honestly, I saw the woman who withstood public humiliation, who faced cruel comparisons, who cried alone, but who never gave up on what mattered. Gustavo became my true partner, not out of obligation, but because we were together in a real struggle, building boundaries, learning to communicate without manipulation. We laughed more, touched each other more, learned to appreciate every gesture of affection without fear of others' judgment. This taught me that happiness needs to be defended. I also realized that teaching Matthias to stand up for himself was one of my most important victories. He learned to say no without guilt, to protect his feelings, to respect others without letting himself be diminished. Once he looked at me and said, "Mommy, now I know that no one can boss us around, only those we truly love." It was a simple phrase, but it resonated within me like a trophy. Everything I went through, all the tears and nights of anguish, helped him grow up knowing the value of respect and family unity. And that is priceless. I began to look at myself more carefully. Before, my choices were shaped by fear of other people's opinions. Today, they are guided by self-love. I've returned to hobbies I'd neglected. I've started writing again. I've started planning trips, little outings, moments of pleasure. Every detail of my routine is now conscious. Every decision is made with clarity. Alice has become a distant shadow. When she appears in memories, I feel only confirmation that I no longer need her approval to be happy. And when we look at Gustavo, we see that we are aligned, firm, without needing intermediaries to tell us who we are or how to win. Live. The rebuilding of my marriage was slow but profound. Gustavo and I began to talk about each situation before making decisions. He learned to recognize signs of manipulation. I learned to set boundaries without feeling guilty. Our home stopped being a minefield and became a safe space for our children and for us. I learned that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of protection, honesty, and unconditional love. And most importantly, I learned that, even after so much suffering, it is possible to rise up, rebuild, and allow yourself to be happy again. Every tear shed turned into strength, every humiliation turned into experience, every fear into learning. Today, when I think about everything I've been through, I still feel butterflies in my stomach, but not from fear, from recognition. I recognized the woman who survived manipulation, criticism, and humiliation, who cried in the silence of the bathroom, who felt shame and helplessness. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment I thought about giving up brought me here. I'm not healed from everything. I still carry scars, but they no longer define me. They remind me of my strength and the importance of protecting those I love. Gustavo, Mateus, and Heitor are my anchor, my certainty that life can be rebuilt even after chaos. I learned that boundaries are sacred, and that respecting yourself is a revolutionary act when someone tries to diminish you. Today, I can look at my mother-in-law without fear or guilt. She became a distant figure, irrelevant in our daily lives. What seemed impossible at first, living without pressure, living with freedom and love, became a reality because I decided, once and for all, that I deserved peace. And by making that decision, I inspired Gustavo to be an even greater partner, and Mateus to feel safe and protected. Even Heitor, even as a baby, feels this harmony. I believe what I've experienced can help others. Many women have kept quiet for fear of losing someone or because of guilt. I've experienced this too, but I've learned that giving in to manipulation doesn't protect love. It only destroys self-esteem. Overcoming grief isn't about destroying those who hurt us. It's about rebuilding our own lives, establishing clear boundaries, and teaching those around us how to treat us. It's about choosing peace, even if it hurts, even if it requires courage. Today, I laugh without guilt. I hug myself in the mirror without shame. I make conscious choices for myself and my family. Every act of self-care is a victory. Every moment of joy shared with Gustavo and the children is confirmation that we can do it. It wasn't easy. I often thought I'd never escape that cycle, but each step, each firm decision, brought me freedom. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine when we decide to fight for what truly matters. If I could say one thing to anyone going through this right now, it would be, the pain is real, the fear is real, the humiliation is real, but so is your strength. There is a way out of suffering. There is a way to rebuild your life, to protect those you love, and most importantly, to protect yourself. Believe in your ability to get back up, to assert yourself, to smile again. I'm here to prove it's possible. You'll get hurt, you'll doubt yourself, but every step toward freedom is worth it. I survived, and today I'm happy in my own story.
How a serious error in a historic building changed my life and revealed secrets no one expected. I'll never forget the sound that changed my life. It was a normal morning at the construction site. The sun was beating down, people were rushing back and forth, and I was in that rush that always accompanied me. I was adjusting a support on the weakest part of the structure when I heard the crack. It was quick, sharp, like a bone breaking. The next instant, the section of the historic wall began to give way. I stood there, stiff, my heart pounding in my throat. Dust rose, the noise drew attention, and before I knew it, people were running toward me. I wanted to go back in time, 2 seconds earlier, just to do everything differently. But the damage was done. The structure was protected, part of a listed heritage site, and I, with my haste and lack of attention, had ruined everything. My name is Raphael, I'm 32 years old, and at the time I worked at a historic building preservation company. It was a job I was proud of, but one I didn't appreciate as much as I should have. I've always been impulsive, the kind of guy who thinks he can solve everything on his own, improvising and let me do it. I like to appear efficient, but deep down, it was carelessness, anxiety, and vanity disguised as self-confidence. I had just made the mistake every professional fears, the one that can't be easily fixed, the one that tarnishes your reputation and haunts you. And the worst part is, knew it as soon as I saw my director's gaze coming my way. Carlos arrived first, with that calm expression that hurt more than a scream. He took a deep breath and simply asked, "Do you understand what you did?" I tried to answer, but my voice wouldn't come out. Anna and Paula were there too, one holding the clipboard, the other looking at me as if in disbelief. I wanted the floor to swallow me. Everything was silent for a few seconds. I heard only the distant sound of machines and the hum of my own thoughts. Fear consumed me, but my pride still tried to find excuses. It was an accident, I thought. It could have happened to anyone. But I knew better. I was in a hurry. The mistake was mine. What followed was a sequence of scenes that felt like a never-ending nightmare. Emergency meetings, people whispering in the hallways, looks that carried more weight than words. Joan, the head of accounting, tried to defend me. He said everyone makes mistakes, that the company should give me a chance. But the damage was real. The cost was high, the company's name was at risk, and Isabella, the preservation inspector, had already been contacted. When she arrived, I felt the ground collapse again. Her look was technical, but also disappointed. "You know what this means, don't you?" she asked. I nodded, lacking the strength to respond. And there, in that moment, I realized my professional life had become a field of ruins. The following days were the worst of my life. I couldn't sleep. When I closed my eyes, I saw the piece of the structure falling, heard the cracking sound, smelled the dust and old paint. The messages started arriving, people asking what happened, others just walking away in silence. I was called to meetings with lawyers. I attended depositions. I heard my name mentioned with suspicion. Every word hurt. And the worst was seeing colleagues I respected look at me with pity. Miguel, a former boss who had been fired months earlier, texted me, "Now you'll understand what it's like to fall and have to get up without help." That day I hated him. Today I'm grateful. It was weeks of heavy silence. The company put me on leave while they evaluated the case, and I stayed home, alone, trying to pretend I still had some control. But the truth is, I was shattered. I would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, remembering the crack in the wall and Carlos's expression. I avoided answering calls, afraid to open my email and see my name involved in some lawsuit. I felt too ashamed to leave the house. The guilt came in waves. Sometimes it made me want to cry. Other times it left me paralyzed. I spent days staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had gotten there. Around that time, I realized how people change when you make a mistake. Before the accident, I was seen as the agile guy who solved everything quickly. Afterward, I became the problem, the culprit, the example of what not to do. Some colleagues blocked me, others stopped responding to messages. Only Anna sent me audio messages every now and then, telling me to hang in there, that things would work out. But I no longer believed it. I couldn't even trust myself anymore. I tried to seek support from my family, but even they seemed to look at me with a mixture of pity and frustration. It was as if I'd let the whole world down at once. One day, I received a court summons. It was the lowest point of my life. The fine was high, and I risked being personally liable for negligence. At that moment, I felt like disappearing. I considered quitting, starting over somewhere else, running away. But something inside me told me that running away would be just another act of cowardice. For the first time, I felt like facing the situation head-on, even if it hurt. I called Carlos and asked to talk. He listened to me silently. I apologized, but he replied, "Sorry isn't enough, Rafael. You need to understand why you got to this point." That kept hammering away at me for days. Little by little, I began to face the mirror, literally. I stood there, observing that tired face, the sunken eyes, the expression of someone who had lost everything. It was difficult to admit that the error wasn't just technical, it was personal. I'd always been impatient, wanting to show my worth, be recognized, stand out. But deep down, what drove me was insecurity. I wanted to prove I was good enough. And in that pursuit, I stopped listening to others, planning calmly, respecting processes, realizing this hurt more than any punishment. It was like discovering that the enemy who destroyed everything had been living inside me all along. That's when I started to change. Slowly, stumblingly, but truly. I went back to studying preservation, rereading technical standards, and taking online courses. I spent days reviewing old reports, trying to understand the signs I'd ignored. I sent messages to colleagues offering sincere apologies, not those rote phrases. but real. Conversations. Some responded, others didn't. Anna told me the company was still talking about me and that Carlos recognized my efforts to repair the damage. This gave me strength. For the first time in months, I felt that perhaps there was still a way to rebuild, not the building, but myself. When the company scheduled the final meeting about the case, my hands were sweating so much I could barely hold my phone. I knew it could be the definitive end of my career there. I arrived early, sat in the reception area, and gazed at the old paintings hanging on the walls, ironically full of history, like the ones I should have preserved. When my name was called, I felt a chill rise from my stomach to my throat. Carlos, Paula, and even Isabella were in the room. The atmosphere was tense, but different. There was no anger, only exhaustion. I asked to speak first. I said I wasn't there to justify myself, but to own up. I explained what I'd done, what I'd felt, how I'd understood the extent of the damage. I spoke about my fear, my shame, and my desire to do things differently. When I finished, the silence was heavy. Carlos took a deep breath and replied, "We can't erase the past, but we can decide what to do with it." I left that meeting not knowing what was to come, but with a strange sense of relief. I had faced what I feared most, judgment. For the first time, I stopped running away, and somehow, that freed me. Days later, I received an email from the company saying that despite the formal punishment, I could participate in a reparation project with the technical team. It wouldn't be a position nor a favor. It would be community work, volunteering, accompanying educational restoration processes. I accepted without a second thought. It was my chance to, if not erase the mistake, at least leave something useful in its place. At first, it was humiliating. Being there as the employee who destroyed the property wasn't easy. People looked at me suspiciously, some whispered, and I felt the weight of each look. But I decided I wouldn't respond with pride. I worked in silence, asking questions, listening, learning. I started taking notes again, studying materials and methods I'd previously ignored. I discovered there was a kind of humility that only emerges after we've lost everything. It's when you understand that learning doesn't diminish anyone. On the contrary, it rebuilds you. And that's what began to happen to me, little by little, every day, in that new environment. It was also during this period that I met new people, different from those I'd known before. Simple, dedicated people who treated me without judgment, only with curiosity. One of them, an older restorer named Clovis, told me something I've never forgotten. A mistake is like a fissure. You don't hide it. You fill it with time, patience, and the right material. And if you do it right, it becomes part of history and no longer a source of shame. I've carried that with me for life. It made me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't the end of my career, but a part of it, the most painful and perhaps the most necessary. Little by little, things began to change. I didn't return to my old position, but I gained the opportunity to contribute to technical reports and training on safety and damage prevention. The irony was clear. The guy who made the mistake was now teaching how to avoid it. At first, it sounded strange even to me, but over time, I realized that this was true reparation, transforming what had been destroyed into something that could protect others. I no longer sought recognition. I just wanted to be useful. And for the first time, I felt like I was truly being useful. Over time, I began to realize how life continued even after a mistake. Each day on the construction site was a reminder that I could choose to act differently. I learned to breathe before moving any structure, to plan each step, to listen to my colleagues. What once seemed small now had weight and importance. I felt more attentive, more present, and this gave me a peace I hadn't known existed. I realized that haste and impulsiveness not only harmed me, but almost destroyed relationships I valued. Learning this was painful, but necessary. My relationship with Carlos changed. At first, I felt a paralyzing fear of him. Today, I can see him as a mentor, someone who didn't let me sink, but also didn't shirk responsibility. Paula and Anna began to trust me again, but not immediately. It took consistency, day after day, week after week. Some colleagues still looked at me warily, but with small actions, acknowledging mistakes and dedication, I managed to rebuild the reputation I had lost. It wasn't quick, and I was often tempted to give up, but the idea of becoming the person I'd always admired professionally kept me going. Forgiveness also came gradually, not from others, but from myself. I needed to stop beating myself up and understand that what had happened didn't define me entirely. I began to see my failures as learning experiences, to accept that making mistakes wasn't shameful if it came with responsibility. I began writing down my thoughts, my memories of each mistake, and this helped organize my mind. I didn't want to forget what happened. I wanted to truly learn. Every account I made, every detail I recorded, was a way to rebuild not only my career, but also my self-esteem and confidence. I also discovered the value of patience. I'd always wanted everything fast, results, recognition, status. Now I realized that rebuilding requires time and discipline. One day during an inspection with Isabella, she commented on my progress. She said I was more careful, attentive to detail, and that the way I handled mistakes showed maturity. That gave me butterflies, but a good kind of butterflies. I felt proud of myself, genuinely, without needing anyone to praise me. It was as if I'd found a balance between skill and responsibility, between impulsiveness and conscientiousness. And with that, my personal life began to change as well. I realized that the same mistakes I made at work were reflected outside of work. Impatience, too hasty decisions, selfishness disguised as efficiency. I began to be more present with my family, to truly listen, to reflect before acting. The small daily victories showed me that transformation was possible and that the process of change wasn't limited to work. What once seemed like punishment became a profound learning experience, teaching me to live more consciously and responsibly, without rushing, but with attention to what truly matters. Today, when I look back, I see how profound the impact of that mistake was. I could have lost myself, given up, or let fear paralyze me. But I decided to face the situation, take responsibility, and rebuild my path. The pain still exists. I feel every failure, every suspicious look that still appears from time to time, but it no longer paralyzes me. I learned that facing the consequences isn't just about paying a price, but also giving yourself the chance to become better. There is no shortcut to redemption. There is effort, patience, and courage. I also learned that asking for help isn't a weakness. At first, I tried to deal with the weight of the mistake alone, and this only increased my anxiety. Accepting guidance from Carlos, listening to Paula, Anna, and even Clovis, accepting criticism and advice was crucial to my evolution. I discovered that rebuilding isn't just technical, but emotional as well. You need to deal with your own guilt, reflect on your attitudes, and change old behaviors. Every step I took, no matter how small, showed me that there was still a path forward, even if difficult. What impacted me most during this process was realizing that no one is defined by a single mistake. I had done something serious, but that didn't have to be my eternal label. Turning what destroyed me into a learning experience was liberating. Today, I act with more care, preparation, attention, and respect. The confidence I regained at work and in my personal life made me understand that even after falling, it's still possible to get back up, more aware, stronger, and more human. If I could speak to my past self, I would say, stop blaming yourself so much, own up, learn, and move on. The pain you feel today is what will guide you tomorrow. Learning to deal with guilt, transform it into motivation, and act responsibly was the greatest lesson I learned. I'm not saying the process is easy, it never is, but it is possible. Every day is an opportunity to do things differently, to make amends, to grow. In the end, what matters isn't the mistake itself, but how you deal with it. I still bear the scars of that moment, but they remind me to be careful, present, and responsible. And most importantly, they remind me that it's possible to start over, even when everything seems lost. Overcoming a mistake isn't about forgetting or pretending nothing happened, but about accepting it, rebuilding, and believing that better days can still come. For anyone going through something similar, there is a path, there is learning, and there is the strength within you to bounce back. Abandoned by my parents at age 12, how I faced neglect and rebuilt my entire life. The parking lot was empty, cold, and filled with that burning asphalt smell that gave me chills. I was 12 years old, alone and shivering, my heavy backpack thrown to the side. My sister Bianca had been taken to the hotel, and my parents, Sylvia and Rogerio, had simply disappeared, saying they needed to fix something quickly. I knew something was wrong, but fear rendered me immobile. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it was about to burst from my chest, and I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. In that instant, I realized there was no safe place for me, that the protection I expected from my family was just an illusion. Every passing car felt like a threat, and every shadow reminded me that I had no one. I remembered all the times I'd asked for help and been ignored, the unrelenting scoldings for every little thing, the cold words that cut more than slaps. I wanted to scream, but my voice died in my throat. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself that I would survive, even without knowing how. It was at that moment that I realized, painfully, that my life would change forever, and that I would need to find strength within myself, because no one else would come and save me. My name is Tiago. I'm currently 17 years old, and I grew up learning early that family doesn't always mean caring. For a long time, I thought my place was to obey and remain silent, because any show of weakness was punished with contempt or silent rage. Sylvia always cared more about her image than our well-being, and Rogerio remained silent, as if my pain were an inconvenience. A childhood that many consider happy for me was marked by tension, fear, and a loneliness that followed me into every corner of the house. Before the abandonment in the parking lot, I already felt invisible within the house, that my opinions, feelings, and even my presence were worthless. I learned to hide so as not to provoke my mother's outbursts and to become almost transparent to escape constant judgment. Life seemed like a game of unstable balance, where any misstep could be emotionally fatal. Even so, I clung to my sister Bianca like a beacon of light, trying to protect what little I could, while I felt more and more the sensation that the world I knew was crumbling around me, and that night in the parking lot would be just the beginning of what I would have to face to survive. When they picked me up from the parking lot after hours of freezing and trying not to cry, I was taken to a temporary home. Entering that strange place was like walking through an unfamiliar tunnel. Everything was new, from the smell of the air to the texture of the mattress, which felt absurdly soft compared to what I called my bed at home. Donna Lucia and Seu Antonio welcomed me with smiles that seemed sincere, but I couldn't believe something like that existed in the real world. The first few nights were the worst. I woke at every noise, expecting to hear screams or slamming doors, mentally reliving every abandonment, every silent assault. I cried in secret, afraid of being considered weak, but also with a strange relief at finally having someone who wouldn't hurt me. It was on this threshold between distrust and hope that I began to realize that perhaps another way of life existed, away from the constant surveillance and judgment of my parents. But it wasn't easy. Anger boiled inside me. I wanted to scream, to curse, but I couldn't. I needed to learn to trust again, and every gesture of affection felt suspicious. The battle between the fear of attachment and the desire to be cared for became daily, and I realized that surviving emotionally would require more than simple physical protection. I needed to rebuild my own mind and believe in my worth. The first meeting with social services was a shock. My mother, Sylvia, started screaming, calling my story a lie, saying I was making it all up to get attention. My father, Rogerio, tried to calm the situation, but his words were hollow, full of excuses about differences in upbringing. I had never felt so small, and at the same time, so angry. The words cut like blades. I realized that my story, my pain, was being challenged by the very adults who were supposed to protect me. It was at that moment that I understood the full extent of the abuse I was experiencing and how I would have to fight, not just to survive, but to be heard, to exist with dignity. My whole body trembled, my breath became shallow, and the rage made me feel like I might explode. But the verbal abuse forced me to hold back my scream. The memory of that parking lot came back with a vengeance, and I realized I could no longer depend on anyone to validate my pain. I decided, in that moment, that my emotional survival would be my responsibility. I could no longer wait for my parents to change. I needed to find my way alone, even if it was painful and lonely. The struggle that began there, in front of adults who were supposed to care for me, would be the first of many, and a cruel lesson in the fragility of familial love when it's false. In the following months, each visit, each conversation with Helena, my social worker, became a lesson in patience and courage. She didn't spare me from reality, but she showed me that I wasn't to blame for what had happened. Little by little, I began to write down my feelings, to tell my story without fear, recording every detail for myself. At first, I trembled when I remembered the abandonment. My stomach churned, my chest heavy, and I relived every cold look, every cutting word. But little by little, each account became a weapon against the silence that imprisoned me. Donna Lucia and Seu Antonio taught me little things that changed my perception. Dinners without arguments, sincere compliments, clear and consistent rules. It was strange, almost disconcerting, to realize that normality existed, and I began to realize that my feelings were valid, that my anger, my fear, my sadness were legitimate. The transformation didn't happen overnight. There were mistakes, relapses, moments when I wanted to give up, feel sorry for myself, or believe nothing would change. But every step, every small advance showed me that I could rebuild my life, that I was not condemned to repeat the cycle of pain I had known. Even with the welcome, the fear didn't disappear. It lived within me, like a silent shadow. Any loud noise made me shiver. Any raised voice made my body react as if I were back in that house. Sleeping was difficult. Sometimes I woke up sweating, thinking my mother was in the room, ready to accuse me of something that didn't even exist. The trauma was physical. My chest tightened, my stomach ached, and I felt an emptiness that couldn't be filled. Bianca was still with them at the time, and it gnawed at me. The guilt was constant. I thought I should have done something, that perhaps I had been too weak, that if I had just held on a little longer, she wouldn't be alone. Helena said it wasn't my fault, but listening and believing were two very different things. I felt like I was learning to walk again, but unsure of where to put my feet. Donna Lucia always said that patience is a kind of love, and I tried to believe it. Even on days when despair returned, I remembered her calm gaze, as if to say, "You don't need to be afraid to exist." That phrase stayed with me, and it was the first brick in my reconstruction. The change began slowly. One day, Seu Antonio invited me to help him fix a fence behind his house. It was a simple job, but the gesture left a lasting impression on me. He treated me like someone capable, not a broken child. As we worked, he told me stories from his youth, spoke of losses, regrets, and how he learned that some pains only stop hurting when we give them meaning. I listened silently, but it moved me, for the first. And time, I realized that being a man didn't mean repressing feelings, and that showing fragility wasn't shameful. When we finished, he looked at me and said, "You did a good job, Tiago." Those 5 words, which might seem simple to anyone, felt like a hug to me. I hadn't heard anything like it in years. That night I slept better. It was the first time my body relaxed without guilt. I realized that perhaps it was possible to rebuild a new idea of family, even if I still couldn't call it home out loud. Sometime later, I received news that messed everything up again. Bianca had run away. I ran to the bathroom and vomited when I heard. The image of her alone, scared, with nowhere to go, tore me apart. Helena assured me they would do everything to find her, and I trusted her, but the weight was unbearable. With each hour, my heart seemed to shrink. I felt helpless, small again, trapped in that cycle of fear. Days felt like months, until finally she was found. Thin, haggard, but alive. When I learned she would be welcomed by the same family that had taken me in, I cried uncontrollably. I cried for relief, for love, for everything I hadn't been able to tell her before. When Bianca arrived, she seemed like a different person. She was ashamed, guilty, afraid. I hugged her, and for the first time, I felt that embrace had weight, truth. Neither of us needed to say anything. The pain was shared, but so was the desire to start over. It was at that moment that I realized that starting over isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning not to let it define what comes next. The following days were intense. Bianca cried almost every night, and I did my best to be there. Sometimes I just sat beside her and we remained in silence, because no words could convey what we had experienced. Donna Lucia, in her calm way, said that silence is also a form of healing. She made coffee, brought blankets, made small gestures that, together, began to rebuild what our parents had destroyed. Rogerio tried to contact us, but the courts were already involved. Sylvia, on the other hand, completely lost control. She was even taken to a hearing and screamed so loudly that the room had to be evacuated. I watched from afar, protected, and for the first time I felt that justice existed even if delayed. Helena explained that the process would be long, but that we were now safe. That word, safe, sounded strange. I had never associated my life with that feeling, and it was there, in that moment, that I understood. Security is not the absence of fear, it is knowing that there is someone willing to protect you when it appears. Over time, I went back to school. School was a minefield of memories, but also of new possibilities. My advisor, Marcia, was the one who most encouraged me to participate in activities, to not hide. At first, I thought she was just doing her job, but then I realized she truly cared. When I entered a science fair and won first place, she hugged me like she was my own mother. I froze for a second, then hugged her back. I felt my heart beat differently. It was life. It was something good, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Feeling joy again scared me more than any sadness. It felt wrong to be happy after everything. But over time, I learned that happiness isn't a betrayal of pain. It's its result. And it was at that point that I began to see myself no longer as a victim, but as someone who survived. I was proof that love, when it finally arrives, can rebuild even what seemed irreversible. Even with all this, it wasn't easy. I still woke up in the middle of the night feeling abandoned, reliving every detail of that parking lot as if it were yesterday. My body reacted before my mind. Sweaty palms, racing heartbeat, a chill running down my spine. Sometimes I wondered if I would ever be able to shake off this weight. But then I looked at Bianca and saw the reflection of my own pain in her eyes. I knew I couldn't give up, that she needed me as much as I needed her. Little by little, we rebuilt a routine, waking up at the same time, making coffee together, helping with the housework, studying. Every simple act was a building block in the reconstruction of our lives. But there were moments of explosion, silly arguments, tears that fell for no apparent reason, nights that seemed endless. I felt angry at my parents, angry at the world, angry at myself. But I also learned that anger isn't weakness. It's a sign that something inside you wants to change. It was during this period that I began to write my memories, my feelings, my doubts. Writing down everything I couldn't say out loud helped me organize my thoughts and make sense of the chaos. I discovered that talking, writing, and sharing didn't make me vulnerable. It made me stronger. The first time my mother tried to contact me after foster care, I felt a mixture of anger and fear. She sent messages saying I was being influenced by adults, that I was lying about everything. My body trembled, and for a second I felt like erasing my entire new life and returning to my old routine just to avoid the emotional confrontation. But I took a deep breath and responded calmly, not to please her, but to set boundaries. I realized I had finally learned something that had previously seemed impossible. Emotional distance is protection. I no longer needed to prove anything to someone who had never valued me. At the same time, my sister watched every move, and I knew I needed to be an example. That's when I realized that rebuilding our life also meant teaching Bianca to trust and fight for herself. This responsibility frightened me, but it also gave me focus. Every decision we made now carried weight, but it was no longer fear, it was choice. The sense of control over our own lives was unprecedented and liberating, even though each step was carefully measured. One of the most memorable moments was when Bianca, finally confident, spoke about everything she'd been through. She revealed details I hadn't known, exposed wounds I hadn't even known existed. Hearing that hurt more than any abandonment or abuse I'd ever felt. But it also brought relief. We were finally being heard. The truth finally had a place to exist. We cried together, hugged each other, and I felt a huge weight lift from my chest. The strength she demonstrated, despite everything, inspired me. For the first time, I felt we were no longer alone in the world, that there were adults who truly cared, and that we had the right to exist without fear. This was a turning point. We realized that our pain didn't have to define us, and that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the ability to act even when it's present. Over the next few years, I began to notice small internal changes. I could sleep without waking up in a panic. I could concentrate on my studies. I could smile without guilt. Small steps, but significant victories. I discovered hobbies that made me feel good. I made true friendships. And for the first time, I felt that my worth didn't depend on the approval of those who had hurt me. The relationships I built were based on respect, trust, and empathy. Each day was an opportunity to reinforce the new identity I was creating. Tiago, the survivor, who learned to fight without violence, to express himself without fear, to love without conditions. Social services, Helena, Donna Lucia, and Seu Antonio were essential. But I also realized that the greatest transformation came from within. The strength I believed didn't exist became visible in my daily choices and actions. The rebuilding process wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, deep sadness, and feelings of injustice. Many times I thought I might never be able to shake the memories of abandonment or constant fear, but each time I overcame one of these crises, I felt proof that it was possible. I learned that overcoming pain isn't the absence of pain, but the ability to move forward despite it. Today, looking back, I can recognize that all the challenges shaped me, taught me resilience and empathy. I feel more prepared to face the world and protect my sister, and even though some scars remain, they no longer define who I am. We are much more than what we were led to believe about ourselves. Even with all the rebuilding, the past still haunted me at unexpected moments. Sometimes, I was alone in my room, and a memory of the abandonment in the parking lot would hit me, like a blow to the chest, making my heart race and my hands tremble. At other times, I'd look at Bianca and feel an overwhelming responsibility, as if I were the only one capable of preventing the world from hurting her again. I learned that traumas don't disappear simply because we're in a safe place. They require attention, patience, and the courage to face each memory without drowning in them. It was during this period that I realized the importance of talking about my feelings and not repressing them. Writing became a way to organize myself, to vent, and also to create a record of my strength. Each completed page was silent proof that I was surviving, learning to cope with pain and transform fear into fuel to move forward. The support of Helena, Donna Lucia, and Seu Antonio was crucial, but the real work happened within me. I discovered that my body and mind needed to relearn how to trust, how to feel, how to live. It wasn't just an external rebuilding, but a constant internal battle, where each small victory became a milestone. I realized that resilience isn't about being strong all the time, but about keeping going even when everything inside tells you to give up. School became a place of challenges and opportunities. At first, I avoided any interaction, afraid someone would discover my past and judge me. But with the encouragement of Marcia and some teachers, I began to participate more, getting involved in projects and activities. My first big moment was when I organized a science presentation, something I would never have dared to do before. Success lay not only in the result, but in the sense of belonging it brought. For the first time, I felt my effort was recognized by people who had no interest in controlling or punishing me. Every compliment, every genuine smile helped fill the voids left by years of neglect. I began to realize that I deserved to occupy a place, that my voice had value, and that my story could serve as a learning experience and inspiration for others going through similar situations. My confidence grew slowly, but it became solid, a foundation for all the changes to come. One of the biggest challenges was dealing with anger and resentment toward my parents. For a long time, I felt like part of my energy was trapped in them, in their mistakes and neglect. But I realized that carrying this anger only held me back. I began writing letters I never sent, expressing everything I wanted to say to Silvia and Rogerio. This exercise helped me externalize my feelings, to see my pain without being consumed by it. I discovered that I didn't need to forgive immediately, but I did need to free up space within myself to grow. Anger transformed into motivation. It drove me to study, to care for Bianca, to plan a different future. Little by little, I realized that my life wouldn't be defined by what they did, but by what I would make of my own choices. Each step toward emotional freedom was accompanied by small rituals. Walk, a piece of writing, a conversation with someone I trusted. All of this helped me solidify the idea that I could exist without fear and that my happiness didn't depend on the approval of those who rejected me. The welcome and love I found taught me lessons my parents never gave me. Donna Lucia and Seu Antonio showed me that care isn't a negotiation, that boundaries and discipline can coexist with affection, and that mistakes can be learning opportunities, not a source of shame. Little by little, these experiences redefined my notion of family. I learned that blood ties don't guarantee love, and that true care comes from those who choose to protect and value you. Each peaceful dinner, each conversation without shouting or threats, each gesture of attention rebuilt my self-esteem and confidence. The feeling of security, though new and sometimes fragile, became a constant in our lives. I began to realize that we deserved to live without fear, that we deserved to be happy, and that we had the capacity to build something better, even after so much suffering. The bond with Bianca strengthened in a surprising way. Now we were allies, accomplices in rebuilding our lives. When something scared or bothered us, we talked, shared fears and strategies without judgment. I became not only a brother, but also a protector and a friend. I learned that strength isn't just about bearing pain alone, but also sharing responsibilities and supporting those we love. This partnership gave us the courage to face challenges and believe in a future that previously seemed impossible. The feeling of no longer being alone was liberating, and it taught me that rebuilding isn't just individual, but also collective. Together, we had a better chance of overcoming the past and building a secure present. As time passed, I began to realize that life gives us small rewards when we fight not to give up. Each achievement, however small, was a victory over the past. I was able to participate in school events, make true friends, and even get involved in volunteer projects, helping children who in some way reminded me of my own story. The feeling of being able to help someone, of offering support and affection, brought a joy I'd never known. It was different from simply existing. It was contributing, positively influencing, and transforming pain into learning. With each smile I brought to another child, I remembered myself in the parking lot, alone and scared, and I felt that all that pain could have a purpose, that my experience could serve to give hope to others. It was through this process that I understood that overcoming doesn't mean forgetting, but using pain as fuel to grow and create a better future. I still face moments of insecurity. Some memories surface without warning. A word or gesture triggers painful memories that I try to hide even from myself. But now I have tools to deal with it. I write, talk, share, and seek support. I've learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that asking for help is an act of courage. Most importantly, even when the pain hits hard, I know I'm not alone. Bianca and I have built a bond that goes beyond blood. It's a bond of trust, care, and true love. Our guardians taught us that true family is one that chooses to be by your side, that offers protection, affection, and understanding, and that even after years of abandonment, it's still possible to feel security and affection. One of the greatest lessons I learned from this experience is that resilience isn't something that emerges out of nowhere, but something that is built daily. Every challenge overcome, every fear faced, every tear shed and shared contributes to inner strength. Today, I know that life isn't just about what happens to us, but about how we react and transform our traumas into learning experiences. I allowed myself to feel, to make mistakes, to grow. And even if not everything is completely healed, I learned that it is possible to live fully and dream of a safe, happy, and fear-free future. Looking back and realizing how much I've grown fills me with gratitude. Gratitude for having survived, for having found people who supported me, for having had the courage to face my traumas. What could have been a story of pain and abandonment gradually transformed into one of overcoming, learning, and hope. I discovered that despite the scars, I can be happy, build my own family, and help my sister grow stronger too. The feeling of autonomy and confidence is something I never imagined I'd feel so fully, but today it's part of who I am. If I could leave a message for anyone going through similar situations, I would say, there is light even when everything seems dark. Pain doesn't have to define you, and rebuilding is possible, even if it's slow and difficult. The strength you seek is within you, and asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's possible to live without fear, feel love and security, and create a future you never imagined possible. My life isn't perfect, and it probably never will be, but it's mine. And finally, I can say that despite everything, I survived, learned, and continue to grow. Hope exists, even after abandonment, neglect, and pain.
After my daughter got married, I discovered that the love I missed most was always my own. I remember that day perfectly. Anxiety tightened my chest almost unbearably, but there was also a twinge of happiness, a shy glow amidst the fear. It was my daughter Isabella's wedding. She was radiant, her face lit with pure joy, the kind we only feel when we believe life will work out. While everyone smiled and prepared for the big moment, I struggled to maintain a balance between pride and the weight of the past. I wanted to be whole, but inside, I felt a mix of excitement and fragility. It wasn't just the event that made me nervous. It was the echo of everything I'd faced before. Every loss, every choice, every moment I'd had to feign strength when I just wanted to fall apart. I didn't know if I was ready to deal with another big change, but life didn't wait for us to be ready. It simply happened. The hotel ballroom where the wedding would take place seemed like something out of a dream. Golden lights reflected on the crystal ceiling. The marble floor gleamed under the guests' hurried footsteps, and the flowers exuded a sweet scent that mingled with the distant sound of the orchestra tuning its instruments. Everything was perfect, at least to the outsider. Inside, I felt the opposite. Every detail of the setting seemed to crush me, as if the beauty of the moment reminded me how far I had strayed from my own happiness. With each breath, an old memory washed over me, and I struggled to hide the slight tremor in my hands. I was the mother of the bride, and I should have appeared confident, radiant, but deep inside, the past insisted on whispering that I had not yet healed from everything I had experienced. When I watched Isabella getting ready, surrounded by her friends, I realized that time had passed faster than I'd imagined. It still seemed like yesterday she'd come running through the hallways of my house, her hair loose and her laughter loud, asking me to comb her dolls. Now she was a grown woman, ready to stand on her own 2 feet. This realization hit me like a gentle blow, proud and painful at the same time. I looked at myself in the bedroom mirror and barely recognized my reflection. There were wrinkles where before there had been only hope. My eyes were still the same, but they held too many stories. And for the first time in years, I realized how much I'd forgotten about myself along the way. As the guests arrived and the music began to fill the room, my heart raced. I knew this moment was about her, about love and the new life that was beginning, but I couldn't help but look at it all with the weight of my own memories. It was as if Isabella's happiness forced me to face everything I'd missed. For so long, I existed solely for her, trying to fill the void left when life took away my certainties. Motherhood saved me, but it also swallowed me. And now, seeing my daughter ready to move on, I realized I would have to learn to live again. Not as a mother, but as a woman. This idea frightened me more than anything. The moment the ceremony began, and Isabella entered arm in arm with her father, I felt something inside me shatter and mend at the same time. The soft sound of the music, the glow of the lights, the emotional looks of the guests. Everything seemed distant. I saw my daughter smiling, and for a moment, I felt my mission accomplished. But I also understood that this was the beginning of my own new beginning. Her life was opening, like a new book, while mine needed to be rewritten. I didn't know how or where to begin, but there, with tears in my eyes and a pounding heart, I realized there was still so much within me that I wanted to live. As the party ended and the hall began to empty, a strange silence descended upon me. I watched people say goodbye, laugh, exchange hugs, and noticed how each of them went on with their lives. It was past midnight when I was left alone, standing in the middle of the hall, surrounded by the remains of flowers and forgotten glasses. The scent of roses mingled with the smell of alcohol and exhaustion. It was then that I realized my daughter was gone. She now had another home, another routine, another world. The house that had once been full of voices and movement would be mine alone again, and I didn't know if I was ready for this silence. It was as if time had suddenly returned to me the loneliness I had learned to hide. In the days that followed, the emptiness became almost physical. I would wake up early, make coffee for 2 out of habit, and then remember there was only 1 cup to fill. The sound of the cutlery, the sound of the wind blowing through the curtains, everything seemed to scream Isabella's absence. I tried to occupy my mind with household chores, but even cleaning lost its meaning. There was no one left to make a mess, to leave a wet towel on the couch, to ask for a cuddle in the middle of the night. I began to realize how much I had lived for her, and how much this prevented me from looking at myself honestly. Without her presence, I had to face what was left of me, and the reflection wasn't pretty. It was made of patches, guilt, and an old weariness. One day, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and let my gaze drift toward the horizon. That's when the memories began to come, one after the other. I remembered the day Isabella's father left, the nights I cried in secret so as not to worry the girl, the years I spent trying to prove I was strong. And maybe I really was, strong enough not to crumble. But now, without needing to be anyone's foundation, I felt completely lost. I discovered I no longer knew who I was outside of my role as a mother. The silence that had once frightened me began to become a mirror. In it, I saw a woman who had grown old trying to be everything to others and forgetting to be something for herself. In Isabella's room, everything was as she had left it. The photos, the books, the notes stuck to the mirror. I entered one night and stared at every detail, as if I could relive a time that no longer existed. I sat on her bed and cried silently, not only from longing, but from the knowledge that a part of me also needed to leave. I couldn't remain trapped in what had already happened. But how could I start over after years of living for someone else? How could I return to being the master of my own life without feeling guilty? It was a confusing sensation, as if I had been freed from a prison and, at the same time, unsure of what to do outside it. It was on one of those lonely nights that something inside me began to change. I looked in the mirror and realized there was still life in my eyes, even behind the marks of time. There was a woman there, tired, yes, but also eager to discover who she could be from now on. And it was at that moment that I decided, for the first time in a long time, that I wanted to find myself again. I didn't know how I would do it, but I was certain I couldn't continue simply surviving. It was time to live again. Not as a mother, nor as an ex-wife, but as Helena. The first steps were timid. In the days following my decision, I began going for morning walks. The neighborhood felt different, as if I were seeing it for the first time. The morning wind touched my face with a gentleness I hadn't felt in years. I began to notice simple details. The bird song, the smell of freshly baked bread from the corner bakery, the sun shining through the leaves. Of the trees. Little things I'd previously ignored because I was always too busy with other people's worries. I discovered that life was there, in the everyday, waiting for me to stop and notice it. Little by little, the weight inside me began to lift. The loneliness still hurt, but it no longer paralyzed me. It was as if, amidst the silence, I was learning to listen to myself again. Over time, I returned to the things I'd left behind. I dug out my old notebooks, filled with notes and poems I'd written when I was younger. Among those yellowed pages, I found a version of myself that time had almost erased. Dreamy, intense, full of plans. I spent hours reading what I'd forgotten I was, and suddenly, I felt the urge to write again. I picked up a pen and let the words flow without much thought. They came out clumsy at first, but as I wrote, something inside me rearranged itself. It was as if I were piecing together the pieces of a life that had shattered along the way. Writing became my refuge again, and for the first time in a long time, I felt pleasure in being with myself. One late afternoon, I decided to visit the art studio in the central square. I always passed by it, but never had the courage to go in. This time, something compelled me. The room smelled of paint and wood, and the sound of soft conversations mingled with the instrumental music playing in the background. I was greeted by a smiling woman named Estela, who invited me to participate in a Saturday painting workshop. I accepted without much thought. At the first meeting, my hands trembled, unsure, as if I had forgotten how to create something just for the pleasure of it. But as I began mixing colors, fear gave way to a sense of freedom. The blank canvas seemed to hear me, welcoming what I couldn't say out loud. And little by little, I began painting my own healing too. Over the next few weeks, Estella became a friend. We talked about art, about loss, about new beginnings. She had a calm way of seeing life, as if she understood that everything has its time to blossom. One day, as we watched the sunset through the studio window, she said to me, "Sometimes the love we most need to rediscover is our own." That phrase echoed within me for days. I realized that for a long time, I had sought to be loved, to feel that I existed, but I had never learned to truly love myself. That was what was missing. More than a new direction, I needed to accept myself completely, with my flaws, scars, and fears. And this discovery, as simple as it was, made me feel alive again. When Isabella called me, I could now truly smile. She told me about painting classes, walks, and coffee alone at the downtown bookstore. She said she was proud to see me well, and I replied that I was just learning to take care of myself. And it was true. Not that the longing had diminished, but I learned to transform it into something beautiful, into gratitude. Life was showing me that love doesn't have to end to change its form. I was still a mother, but I was also once again a woman, a friend, a learner. And deep down, I realized that this transition was the most beautiful part of starting over. It was on one of those afternoons when the sun seemed to play on the studio windows that I met Miguel. He was a photographer and had been invited to photograph a group exhibition of his students' work. When he arrived, he had a camera slung around his neck and a serene smile, the kind that disarms even the most wary of hearts. He stared at my canvas for a while, silently, until he said, "Your colors have something melancholic and beautiful at the same time," as if each brushstroke were a memory trying to heal. I didn't know what to say. It had been so long since someone had looked at me with sensitivity, without haste, without judgment. That simple compliment, coming from a stranger, stirred something deep inside me, a part I thought had lain dormant forever. Miguel began visiting the studio more frequently. At first, our conversations were short, shy, but full of curiosity. We talked about art, the power of images, and how time changes the meaning of things. He had a calm way of being, as if each gesture were a pause in the chaos of the world. Gradually, our exchanges became more intimate. We talked about our losses, about loves that passed, about the paths life insists on retracing when we least expect it. And without realizing it, I began to look forward to his visits. His presence brought me a kind of peace I didn't know I could still feel. One afternoon, after class, he invited me for coffee. I accepted. We talked for hours, as if time had forgotten to pass. Miguel listened to me with rare attention, not trying to fix anything, just welcoming me. When I mentioned how long it took me to find meaning in life after my daughter left home, he simply said, "Maybe that emptiness was the space life created for you to fit back into yourself." I remained silent, absorbing those words. They made sense. For the first time, I understood that what I called loneliness could also be an invitation, a fertile space to begin again. The following weeks were light, different. Miguel sent me photographs he took during his walks, crooked trees, old windows, children running in squares, and said each image carried a piece of calm. I, in return, sent photos of my unfinished paintings. Our exchanges were simple but sincere, and little by little, I began to feel a kind of discreet joy growing within me. It wasn't the euphoria of youthful love, but something more serene, mature, tranquil, a silent affinity that built slowly. And perhaps that was what made it all so beautiful, the lack of rush, the freedom to simply feel. One night, as we walked along the shore, Miguel took my hand. The gesture was gentle, almost shy, but full of meaning. There was no promise, no declaration, just a silence that spoke volumes. I looked out to sea and realized how everything had changed. The wind, the sound of the waves, my own body, lighter. For the first time in a long time, I felt the past no longer defined me. I could allow something new to emerge without fear of losing who I was. Miguel didn't come to fill what was missing, but to remind me that I could still feel. And in that moment, I knew I was finally ready to move on, with my heart whole, but at peace. Time passed, and life reorganized itself gently, almost imperceptibly. Miguel and I continued to see each other, without labels, without demands. Sometimes we painted together, other times we just walked in silence, observing the world. He taught me to see beauty in the intervals, in the pauses, in ordinary days. And it was like that, without rushing, that I realized something fundamental. I no longer needed major events to feel alive. It was enough to be present, whole, in the now. The pain that once shadowed me began to dissolve, not because it disappeared completely, but because I learned to live with it without letting it define me. I understood that life is made of cycles, and that each end carries the beginning of something we don't yet know how to name. Isabella, when she visited me, said I seemed different, lighter, more serene. I smiled and replied that I was just learning to be. She watched me tenderly, perhaps realizing that her mother had finally found herself. We talked for hours, exchanging confidences as two women, not just as mother and daughter. It was beautiful to see that the love between us had matured. There was no longer dependence, no guilt, only respect and affection. When she left, I no longer cried. I missed her, yes, but a good kind of longing, the kind that warms the heart and reminds us how generous life can be when we allow ourselves to begin again. One morning, I woke before sunrise. The sky was still covered in shades of gray and lilac, and cold air drifted in through the open window. I went to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat on the porch with a blanket draped over my shoulders. The world seemed quiet, suspended, as if waiting for me to fully wake up. I closed my eyes and thought about everything I'd experienced: the pain, the fears, the falls. But I also thought about the small victories, the reunions, the moments I chose to stand when it would have been easier to give up. It was then that I realized that happiness doesn't arrive all at once. It comes gradually, disguised as peace. And in that moment, I felt that peace embrace me completely. Miguel arrived, soon after, with 2 cups of coffee and a lazy smile. He sat beside me, and we sat in silence, watching the sunrise. Golden light flooded the balcony, and I could feel the warmth touch my skin as a reminder that time, despite everything, remains generous. He looked at me and simply said, "You look beautiful like this, quiet, at peace." I smiled, not out of vanity, but out of gratitude, because for the first time in many years, I saw myself through my own eyes, and I liked what I saw. The woman who had once hidden behind her responsibilities now blossomed, whole, imperfect, and free. Today, when I reflect on everything, I realize that life didn't break me. It simply shaped me differently. Each loss taught me something. Each silence brought me closer to myself. Isabella followed her path. I found mine. And love, in its different forms, continued to be the bridge that keeps us standing. I don't need perfect endings, just simple truths. And the greatest of these is that starting over isn't about forgetting the past, but learning to walk alongside it, without fear. That's how I started living again. That's how I discovered that freedom, after all, was always within me.
How I got out of fear and pressure to build my own life. My name is Arthur. I'm 25 years old, and today I can say I've finally found peace in my choices. But a few years ago, my life was a constant whirlwind. I was in my 6th year of engineering and felt trapped in a routine that wasn't my own. I woke up before dawn, braved crowded buses, rushed to classes and labs, trying to be the model student my parents always expected. But inside, I felt empty. Every calculation, every project felt more like a burden than a learning experience. Pressure came from all sides, from the university, from my family, and most of all, from myself. I wasn't living, I was surviving, playing a role that suffocated me every day. The fear of disappointing my parents kept me going, even when everything inside me screamed for me to stop. Mornings were particularly hard. Looking out the bus window and watching the city awaken gave me a sense of helplessness. My classmates seemed determined, discussing internships, competitions, and future plans, while I felt lost, as if I were just taking up space. When I got home, I had to smile at the dinner table, answering trivial questions with "everything's fine," while my chest tightened. At night, I would isolate myself in my room, staring at the ceiling, trying to control the anxiety that silently consumed me. I saw myself as broken, and I didn't know how to reconcile my desire for freedom with the weight of the expectations surrounding me. The breaking point came on a Wednesday afternoon during a project presentation. I hadn't slept well, and anxiety was building inside me. As I walked to the front of the room, I felt my hands grow cold and my voice fade. The words wouldn't come. Sweat poured down my face, and my heart felt like it was bursting. I finished speaking listlessly and ran to the bathroom. I locked the door and cried for a long time, not out of shame, but out of relief at finally admitting to myself that I couldn't keep pretending. There I realized that my biggest problem wasn't engineering, it was living someone else's life. In the days that followed, the thought of dropping out of school became impossible to ignore. I knew it would be painful for my parents, but there was no other way. I spent nights planning how to tell them, rehearsing responses, imagining reactions. Finally, I sat down with them and said, "I want to drop out of school." The silence that followed was crushing. My mother cried softly. My father simply walked away. For the first time, I felt like I was being honest with myself, even if it meant disappointing those I loved most. The following weeks were silent and introspective. My father barely spoke to me. My mother tried to soothe the sadness with gentle gestures. I isolated myself, questioning my decisions, but something inside me was beginning to change. I returned to old hobbies, disassembling devices, creating gadgets, and understanding how things worked. Small projects that had previously been just fun began to fulfill me in a way that college never could. With each discovery, I felt the spark of purpose rekindle. Finally, I realized I could rebuild my life on my own terms, even without a diploma or immediate approval. Getting back to tinkering with small projects was liberating. I spent entire afternoons disassembling old devices, testing circuits, and finding improvised solutions to simple problems. The curiosity I thought I'd lost resurfaced with a vengeance, reminding me of who I truly was. Each piece fitting correctly, each functional prototype, gave me a sense of achievement I'd never felt in college. Soon, I began sharing some of these projects online. The first sale was minimal, but the emotional impact was enormous. Someone recognized my effort and valued what I created. For the first time, I felt my actions had meaning of their own. Even with this small flame lit, the doubts didn't disappear. Was this just an escape I had thrown away years of study and family expectations? With every disapproving look, especially from my father, I felt the weight of guilt. But all it took was immersing myself in a project to reconnect with something deeper, the feeling of making something my own, something real. Social media, once a cruel reminder of what I'd left behind, now became a source of learning, inspiration, and even connection with people who shared the same passion. It was then that I created a profile on a freelance platform. Without formal experience or a robust portfolio, I offered my design, automation, and prototype assembly services. The first few days were uneventful, but persistent. I kept posting and perfecting my work. A week later, I received my first order, a small automation system for a local store. I worked for days, studying, making mistakes, and redoing until I delivered. When I received payment and the client's thanks, I felt a quiet, genuine satisfaction unlike any academic recognition. I was building something tangible with my own hands. Life, however, soon tested me. A major client, responsible for a large portion of my income, disappeared without paying. It was a blow that left me in shock. Bills piled up, a computer malfunctioned, and, to make matters worse, a message from my mother suggesting, "Son, there's still time to go back to college." It hit me like a punch in the gut. I seriously considered dropping out and resuming my studies, but something inside me stopped me. I had come too far to give in to fear again. I decided to resist. I sold my bike to fix my computer, sought help from friends to promote my services, and intensified my postings on forums and tech groups. Almost by chance, an engineer from a startup noticed my work and invited me to a conversation. My hands were sweating and my heart was pounding, but I accepted the challenge to develop a prototype for an internal project. I spent nights studying and testing, making mistakes, and starting over. When I handed it in, he replied, "You're ready for something bigger." At that moment, I felt for the first time in years that someone believed in me for what I was capable of, not for my degree. From that project onward, my life began to change rapidly. What seemed like a one-off job turned into a series of opportunities. The startup was impressed by my dedication and invited me to take on new, increasingly complex challenges. Working with larger companies was daunting, but also exciting. For the first time, I felt like my career was being built on my own merit, not on a title or the approval of others. With each completed project, my confidence grew, and with it, a sense of belonging to something I truly wanted. Despite growing up, my relationship with my parents remained fragile. My father rarely called me, and when he did, The conversation revolved around going back to college. This hurt me more than I cared to admit. Some nights, I considered lying, saying I'd gone back to college just to ease the tension. But I knew that would betray the only truth that kept me going, my choice, my authenticity. The silence between us was heavy, but I began to realize that I didn't need his approval to feel complete. My validation came from my own efforts. It was then that I had the idea to create something entirely my own. Inspired by the difficulty I faced finding opportunities, I wanted to develop a platform that connected small freelance technicians and engineers with companies in need of quick and affordable solutions. At first, it seemed impossible. I had no team, resources, or management experience, but I had the will, and that became my fuel. I spent days designing, programming, studying marketing, and validating ideas. Each sleepless night was one step closer to turning an idea into a tangible reality. The following months were intense. I learned to program, design interfaces, integrate systems, and serve clients on my own. I made many mistakes. I lost money, hired people who weren't a good fit for the project, and had to redo important parts. But for the first time, each failure was a learning experience, not a reason to give up. When I launched the first version of the app, I stared at the screen for hours. It wasn't perfect, but it captured my essence, my journey, and my persistence. For the first time, I felt genuine pride in something that was entirely mine. The app began to gain visibility. Professionals signed up, companies showed interest, and small victories began to emerge. It was heartwarming when my father called me, not to ask about college, but to congratulate me. The words were few, but they were full of recognition, something I'd been seeking for years. Each user message, each new sign-up reinforced that my efforts were paying off. For the first time, I understood that success isn't about money or titles, but about impact, authenticity, and the ability to transform passion into reality. As the platform grew, I realized the challenge went far beyond programming and design. I needed to learn about management, finance, contracts, customer service, and marketing, all at once. Every mistake became a lesson. I hired people who weren't a good fit for the project. I made the wrong investments, I lost money, but unlike Arthur in the past, I didn't let myself be paralyzed by the fear of failure. Every stumble became a learning experience, and every success strengthened my confidence. For the first time, I understood that success isn't linear, but built step by step, with persistence and patience. Even with professional achievements, insecurity still plagued me. Sometimes I'd look at everything I'd accomplished and wonder if I deserved to be there. The old imposter syndrome tried to convince me I was just lucky, not competent. At those times, I'd remember the sleepless nights, the rejected projects, the silent tears in college. It reminded me that every victory, no matter how small, was the result of my genuine effort. So I'd take a deep breath and move on, learning to appreciate the difficult days as much as the triumphs. 2 years after launching the platform, I received an unexpected offer. A large technology company wanted to acquire my project. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but after analyzing it, I realized it was real. The process was intense, full of meetings, negotiations, and complex decisions. I, who 3 years earlier had cried locked in the college bathroom, was now negotiating values I never imagined I could achieve. Each decision reminded me of where I came from, the fear, the doubt, and the feeling of inadequacy. But above all, I remembered that my persistence had brought me this far. When I finally signed the contract, my hands trembled, not because of the money, but because of the significance of that achievement. Every sleepless night, every tear, and every moment of insecurity were reflected there, on that piece of paper. For the first time, I felt complete peace. There was no anger or resentment, only gratitude. I understood that every failure prepared me for that moment, and that success is not a reward, but a consequence of persisting, even when no one else believes in it. I closed my eyes and silently thanked myself for not giving up on myself. After the sale, my life changed internally more than externally. I no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. I began sharing my story in videos and speaking engagements, demonstrating that the journey matters more than the destination. The response was surprising. People across the country identified with me, were inspired, and found the courage to follow their own paths. I discovered that my purpose went beyond technology. It was to help people recognize their worth, regardless of others' expectations. Finally, I understood that being true to yourself is the greatest success anyone can achieve. Today, when I look back, I see the boy lost between fear and the desire to please. That Arthur believed he needed to follow the path others laid out for him, failing to realize that the true path is made by one's own steps. If I could speak to him, I would tell him not to blame himself so much, to trust his own voice more, and to believe that making mistakes doesn't make him weak, just human. I would also tell him that dreaming isn't a waste of time, and that authenticity is the most precious thing anyone can have. Because, in the end, being true to yourself is what truly matters. I still have difficult days. Sometimes I wake up with a heavy heart, feeling the weight of responsibilities and the decisions I need to make. Other times, anxiety tries to remind me that everything can fall apart. But I've learned to deal with it. I know that fear is natural and that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward even when trembling. Today, I see failures as opportunities for learning and growth. I've understood that happiness isn't in never failing, but in finding purpose even in difficult times. The experience made me more empathetic. Today, I understand that everyone carries silent battles. That colleague who seems confident may be crumbling inside. The person who appears strong may just be trying to survive. So I began to consciously practice kindness, listening, supporting, being present. When I receive messages saying, "Arthur, your story helped me," I feel gratitude and humility. Because deep down, I know that the person who was most saved by this story was myself. Sharing my journey has become a daily form of healing and transformation. Sometimes I return to the university just to walk the halls. The same place that once suffocated me now brings me peace. I pass by the room where I presented that project and smile, remembering the tears, the doubts, and the critical looks. I realize how necessary each fall was. Without those experiences, I wouldn't have learned to get back up, nor heard my own voice. Life, I've learned, prepares us for what comes next in unexpected ways. It tests, challenges, and strengthens us, teaching us to rebuild ourselves each time we fall. Today, I don't know what the future holds, and for the first time, that doesn't scare me. I continue creating, learning, and making mistakes with a light heart. Everything I've experienced has brought me to a place of peace, purpose, and gratitude. And if there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this: no one is born ready. It's in the failures, the attempts, and the nights of uncertainty that we find ourselves. My name is Arthur, and this is the story of how I learned that the greatest success in life is allowing yourself to be who you truly are, even when the whole world tries to mold you.
I was enslaved by my family and kicked out of my home. What happened next will surprise you. I never imagined my life could change so quickly. My name is Julia, I'm 17 years old, and I grew up in a home that seemed normal to the outside world, but to me was suffocating. For years, I was treated as an extension of my parents, Emmanuel and Laura, babysitting my 4 siblings without ever receiving a thank you or any recognition. My childhood and adolescence were filled with the feeling of being trapped, of never being a priority, always responsible for household chores and caring for others, while my parents continued their routines, oblivious to my exhaustion. I learned to swallow my anger, sadness, and feelings of injustice, but that didn't erase the knot in my stomach that I felt every time I woke up. My siblings, Miguel, Emma, Lucas, and Sophia, were the only people who gave me small doses of affection, and even then, I felt alone. The routine was overwhelming, and I became accustomed to denying myself. The feeling of being constantly on alert, as if any mistake could cost me more than I deserved, stayed with me day and night. I remember the butterflies in my stomach and the constant tension, even when I tried to distract myself with studies or small temporary escapes, because I knew that at some point my parents would call, demanding that I forget my desires and prioritize only the house and the care of my siblings. The first spark of change came when I started working at the neighborhood coffee shop. It wasn't much, but it gave me something I'd never felt before: autonomy. The smell of coffee, the sound of the machines, the routine of serving customers. It all felt like a parallel world to my home. For the first time, I had my own money and, more importantly, the feeling that my choices could matter. But my parents reacted as if I'd committed a crime. Emmanuel was irritated, complaining that I was disobeying and abandoning responsibilities, and Laura remained silent, but with that disapproving look that always weighed on me. One night, after a particularly intense disagreement, I was kicked out of the house. I remember the moment exactly. I was clutching my backpack, my eyes burning with tears, and each step to the door felt overwhelming. I felt a deep emptiness, mixed with fear and relief. Fear of having nowhere to go, of being rejected, but relief at finally freeing myself, however abruptly, from that space that suffocated me. My life had turned upside down in seconds, and I realized that I could no longer depend on them, that I needed to fight for myself, even without knowing exactly how. Moving wasn't easy. I lived with my grandparents, Nusa and Ricardo, who welcomed me with open arms and huge hearts. But still, the fear of failure lingered. Every morning, I woke up remembering Emmanuel's cold gaze and Laura's indifference, and I felt like giving up. The first few days were filled with tears, doubts, and insecurity. I had to learn to cook for myself, organize myself, and balance school and work in a way I'd never had to before. Nusa kept reminding me that I didn't need to carry the guilt of being exploited, and Ricardo always said that my intelligence and courage were greater than I imagined. Little by little, I began to feel that I wasn't alone and that my choices could have value. Still, there were days when anger returned with a vengeance, reminding me of the manipulation and neglect I'd suffered. The emotional toll was heavy. Sometimes I'd find myself waking up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, wondering how my parents might react or if my siblings were okay. Anxiety and feelings of inadequacy plagued me constantly, but something inside me began to shift. The desire to prove to myself that I could be more than they led me to believe began to overcome the fear. The turning point began when I met Professor Rodriguez at school. She was the first person to truly encourage me to pursue scholarships and academic opportunities. I remember the day she called me in for a chat after class. She looked me in the eye and told me, with a confidence I'd never felt before, that I had the potential for great things and that I couldn't settle for less. At that moment, I felt a mixture of shame and hope because I knew she was right, but I was also afraid of failing. I began studying diligently, using every free minute to learn, research, and prepare for exams. At the same time, I balanced my work at the cafeteria and tried to stay in touch with my brothers, who were my emotional anchor. There were endless nights of studying, silent tears, days when everything felt too much and my self-esteem seemed to vanish. But every small achievement, every good grade, every compliment from teachers and friends reminded me that I was capable of changing my story. I discovered that the greatest strength came not from the absence of fear, but from the ability to continue even when it was present, and that seeking help, accepting love and guidance was not a sign of weakness, but of courage. In this process, my friends Megan and Casey were fundamental. They were there for me during the hardest moments, when the longing and pain became unbearable. We spent hours talking about my dreams, about the feeling of always fighting against something invisible, and about the injustice of having been exploited at home. I remember one afternoon in particular. I sat on the sidewalk, my body heavy with exhaustion, tears streaming down my face, and Megan held my hand, telling me that I didn't have to face everything alone. It was the first time I felt someone believed in me without expecting anything in return, and it changed my perception of myself. I realized that I could trust, support myself, and, most importantly, I deserved respect and care. Every conversation, every laugh, every simple gesture from these friends reminded me that my life could be different, that I wasn't doomed to repeat the cycle of exploitation. Little by little, I began to feel that my voice had value, that my choices could have real consequences, and that life could offer me opportunities if I was willing to seek them. This block of internal and external changes, of pain and small victories, was crucial for me to realize that, despite everything, I had the power to write my own story. Adjusting to my new life with my grandparents brought challenges I hadn't anticipated. Although Nusa and Ricardo were incredible, there was a silent pressure on me not to fail. Each day required me to wake up early, study, help around the house, and still keep my job at the coffee shop. Physical fatigue mixed with emotional exhaustion. My body felt heavy, my back ached, my feet swollen from so much walking, and at the same time, my heart tightened with longing and fear. But little by little, I learned to organize my routine, to delegate some tasks effectively, and to realize that small daily victories were signs of progress. Each morning I managed to wake up without the weight of guilt showed me that it was possible to rebuild my life. It was a slow but steady process, and I began to realize that freedom came with responsibility, and that being responsible for myself could be liberating, even if painful. One of the most memorable moments of this period was receiving my first acceptance letter to a scholarship program. I remember sitting in the living room, my hands trembling, as my grandparents looked on hopefully, and tearing open the envelope with almost reverent care. When I read the words confirming my achievement, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Genuine pride, not just for what I'd done, but for what I'd overcome to get there. It was as if all the tears, sleepless nights, feelings of injustice and fear had been rewarded by that moment of validation. The feeling that my efforts had genuine value gave me an inner strength I hadn't known existed. At the same time, I thought about my parents and the way they treated me. I felt anger, sadness, and also a slight sense of silent revenge, but soon realized that my focus couldn't be on them, but on myself. This balance between anger, memory, and ambition became part of my emotional routine, and I learned to channel negative feelings into energy for growth. During this time, my siblings continued to be my safe haven. Even with the forced distance, I kept in touch with Miguel, Emma, Lucas, and Sophia, who sent me messages, told me about their routines, and, most importantly, reminded me that I didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. Every call and every conversation was a small injection of courage. Knowing that they still trusted me, that they saw me as a sister and a role model, strengthened my resolve. At the same time, this bond reminded me of the wounds I carried. I felt anger at the way our parents treated us, and sadness at having lost moments that would never return. But, instead of paralyzing me, this mixture of love and indignation drove me. I wanted to set a different example for them, to show them that even in the most unfair circumstances, it's possible to fight, grow, and achieve something better. This realization began to give me the strength to face each day, even when it seemed impossible to continue. There were days when I almost gave up. I remember a rainy afternoon, sitting on my bed in my room, hugging my knees, my thoughts swirling. I felt like I had no energy to study, work, or even take care of myself. I thought about my parents, the injustice of life, and the feeling of abandonment I'd carried for years. But it was in that moment of despair that I realized I couldn't let myself sink. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered everything I'd overcome: the sleepless nights caring for my siblings, the hidden tears, the feeling of not being enough. I decided, right then and there, that I could no longer let myself be defined by what happened to me, but by what I would do next. That moment was crucial. I realized that change depended on me, on my decisions, and on the courage to put myself first, even through fear and pain. Rebuilding didn't happen overnight. It was made up of small steps, mistakes, and successes. I had to learn to deal with my parents' anger, the anxiety of studying and working, and doubts about my abilities. Each morning was an exercise in persistence, each night an opportunity for reflection. I made mistakes. I missed deadlines, overdid tasks, overextended myself at times, and neglected my health at others. But I also got things right. I made true friends, dedicated myself to my studies, learned to organize myself, and began to understand that the support of my family and friends was a solid foundation. Little by little, I realized that my life didn't need to be defined by my painful past. I could choose my path, and the feeling of control over my choices was liberating. Each achievement, no matter how small, reinforced the certainty that I could, indeed, write a different story for myself and my siblings, and that the pain I carried didn't need to stop me from achieving my dreams. As I gained confidence and independence, I noticed my parents were beginning to show signs of regret. Emmanuel, previously always authoritarian, began secretly calling me, asking how I was, trying to get closer in a strange and uncomfortable way. Laura also showed genuine concern, albeit belatedly, wanting to know if I was okay and if my brothers missed me. I confess that at first, their every gesture left me confused, and anger came along with the doubt. Should I accept this contact or keep my distance? It was a process of constant evaluation, of learning to set boundaries, of realizing that forgiving didn't mean forgetting, and that my priority needed to be my well-being. Experience taught me that not every regret immediately changes the past, but that acknowledging a mistake is the first step to rebuilding relationships. I learned to deal with these contradictory feelings, to validate my own emotions, and to understand that even in family relationships, respect and autonomy must be preserved. My study routine intensified. Each scholarship I received was the result of dedication, sleepless nights, and patience. I remember spending hours researching, writing essays, studying languages and math, always afraid I wouldn't make it. But each achievement strengthened me. My body felt tired, but my mind was more alert and my heart felt lighter. Professor Rodriguez's support was essential. She not only guided me academically, but also motivated me emotionally. Every time she said, "You can do it," I felt it wasn't just encouragement, but confirmation that my story could be different. I realized it wasn't just about achieving external things, like scholarships and grades, but about realizing that each effort brought me closer to being the person I wanted to be: independent, resilient, and confident. Megan and Casey continued to be with me every step of the way. In the most difficult moments, when the emotional weight was almost unbearable, they were there to listen, hold me, and remind me that I was capable. Once, after an extremely exhausting week, I sat with them in the park, my hands trembling, and cried out everything I had accumulated over the past few months. They didn't use cliches or cliches. They simply listened and let me feel the pain. It was in this welcoming space that I realized something important. We don't have to face everything alone. Having people who support us doesn't diminish our strength. On the contrary, it gives us the courage to keep going, even when life seems unfair. Little by little, life began to reward me in ways I never imagined. I secured important scholarships, began to plan my future clearly, and most importantly, began to feel at ease with my choices. I remember looking in the mirror and realizing that, for the first time, I saw someone who wasn't defined solely by the past or what others expected of me. The feeling of autonomy and control over my life was overwhelming, mixed with deep gratitude for my grandparents, friends, and teachers who supported me. The pain was still there, but I was able to transform it into learning and fuel to continue growing. A defining moment was the first school meeting my parents attended after the entire conflict. I was nervous, my heart racing, my body tense, and my palms sweating. But as I looked at them, I realized my focus wasn't on confronting them, but rather on showing them how much I had grown. I spoke confidently about my studies, my achievements, and my plans, feeling every word like a declaration of autonomy. They listened, surprised, and I could tell they were finally seeing the daughter who had always existed beyond the nanny I had been. I felt a mixture of relief, pride, and even a certain comfort, because the feeling of being recognized as a person, not as a servant or an extension of the family, was liberating. There, I realized that, despite the wounds, life could offer new opportunities, and that overcoming obstacles wasn't just about me, but about changing the dynamics of my own story. Rebuilding my self-esteem wasn't linear. There were days when I felt capable of conquering the world, and others when the memory of exploitation and neglect crushed me. I remember one night sitting on the porch of my grandparents' house, feeling the cold wind on my face and crying uncontrollably. Each tear carried anger, pain, but also hope. At that moment, I realized that feeling all of this wasn't a weakness, but part of the healing process. I needed to accept my emotions, learn from them, and transform them into strength. It was during this period that I began writing about my story, like a personal diary, recording every triumph, every failure, and every reflection. This act of letting it all out helped me organize my thoughts, recognize my own growth, and recognize that my pain had value but didn't need to define me. At work at the coffee shop, I began to see myself differently. Before, it was just an obligation, something I did to escape the routine at home. Now, it was a space for learning and independence. I could smell the fresh coffee, hear the customers' hurried orders, and even tired, there was something rewarding in knowing my effort was yielding results. Every note counted, every compliment received, reminded me that I could be competent, trustworthy, and valued. The feeling of achieving something with my own hands, of being responsible for my own livelihood and growth, was indescribable. Gradually, I realized that work wasn't just a financial obligation, but also a way to assert my autonomy and rebuild my self-esteem. My relationship with my siblings also strengthened. I'd always kept in touch, but now the conversations were different. We shared laughs, advice, and even small confidences, as if we were forging a bond that had previously been stifled by our parents. Miguel would seek me out to talk about school, Emma would share friends' secrets, Lucas and Sophia would send me drawings and loving messages. Their every gesture reminded me that familial love could exist, even if distant and imperfect. I learned to cherish these bonds, to protect them, and not allow my parents' neglect to destroy the connection we had. This gave me the motivation to move forward, even in moments when homesickness was overwhelming and the feeling of injustice seemed unbearable. I realized that sometimes true family isn't just about raising children, but also about supporting, loving, and being there. There were moments of regret and reflection on my past. I asked myself, why did I let this happen for so long? Why did I accept exploitation without fighting back? But over time, I learned that it wasn't my fault. The responsibility lay with those who should protect and value me. This realization was liberating. I began to forgive myself, to look at myself with compassion, and to recognize that surviving and fighting were already extraordinary feats. Understanding this gave me a new perspective on life, that even when we are treated unfairly, we have the ability to rebuild ourselves, to seek support, and to transform pain into learning. This realization became an emotional foundation that allowed me to face future challenges with greater courage and clarity. Aunt Barbara entered my life at this time as a bridge of reconciliation. She talked to my parents, showing them the real impact of their actions and encouraging sincere changes. This not only helped reduce conflict, but also allowed me to observe that even people who were previously hostile can recognize their mistakes and try to make amends. The experience taught me that justice doesn't have to be vengeful. It often comes from conscious choices to improve, change, and support. Seeing my parents, albeit timidly, begin to change their attitudes reinforced the certainty that my effort, courage, and determination were not in vain. I was finally reaping the rewards of my resilience and discovering that overcoming is not just about surviving, but also about allowing others to learn and grow alongside you. At 18, looking back, I realize how much I've grown and how much I've fought to find my place. I went from a teenager who felt invisible and exploited to someone capable of making decisions, setting goals, and fighting for her own dreams. Every scholarship I won, every compliment from Professor Rodriguez, every word of encouragement from Megan and Casey, every smile from my siblings reminded me of the journey I've traveled. I still feel pain when I think about the past, but that pain no longer paralyzes me. It has become fuel, reminding me of what I've overcome and what I can still achieve. Today, I understand that life doesn't have to be perfect to be valuable, and that our strength isn't measured by the absence of difficulties, but by the ability to keep going, to seek support, and to believe in ourselves. Reuniting with my parents remains a delicate matter. Emmanuel and Laura still carry their flaws, but I see genuine changes. Our relationship isn't perfect, but now there's respect and understanding. I've learned to set boundaries and recognize that my autonomy doesn't depend on their approval. This emotional maturity has brought me peace. I can feel grateful for their efforts without forgetting the hurts of the past. This awareness makes me stronger, because now my happiness isn't tied to the approval of those who once exploited me, but to my own ability to live according to my principles and goals. I've discovered that forgiving and moving forward is an act of self-love, and that resilience is more than just enduring. It's transforming pain into learning. Today, I work, study, and continue to cultivate friendships and family ties that truly strengthen me. Every challenge I face reminds me that nothing comes without effort, but also that every achievement is the result of the courage to not give up. When I look at my grandparents, I see the unconditional support that allowed me to get back on my feet. When I look at my friends, I see the importance of having people who believe in you even when you doubt yourself. And when I look at myself, I see someone who faced abandonment, manipulation, and injustice, but found the strength to create a dignified life full of learning, love, and possibilities. This realization is liberating and gives me hope that I can continue growing, even in the face of any adversity. Sharing my story online is a step I've taken to inspire others who, like me, have felt trapped, invisible, or exploited. I want them to know that it's possible to change, rebuild, and achieve, even when everything seems lost. There's no magic formula. There's dedication, courage, seeking support, and above all, the decision to believe in yourself. Life is full of challenges, but also opportunities for growth. Writing these words, my heart feels lighter, because I know my experience can serve as an example that pain doesn't have to be the end, and that there's always a path, even if narrow and full of obstacles, to a more just and happy life. Looking ahead, I know I will still face challenges, and that some wounds will never completely disappear. But now, they don't define me. Today, I choose my life, my steps, and my achievements. I discovered that overcoming adversity isn't just about getting there, but about living the process of rebuilding, valuing, and freeing yourself. I know my story is proof that even in the most difficult circumstances, it's possible to resist, fight, and triumph. For anyone reading this, I want to leave a clear message. Your pain doesn't have to be eternal. You deserve support, love, and respect, and the strength to transform your life is already within you. I'm Julia, and I managed to turn things around. If I could do it, you can too.